Happy New Year, everyone. It's the first episode of the year, and we'll take a look at Niger's accusation that Nigeria is undermining the country. Now, also, we head to Rivers State, where Governor Simeon Alaifobara has signed the 2025 budget presented to the Okujumbo-led State House of Assembly. Now, this is Standpoint. I am Precious Amayu. Nigeria has denied accusations from Niger's military leader, Brigadier General Abdul Rahmani Tichiani, of colluding with France to destabilize the junta-led nation. In a Christmas Day interview, General Tichiani accused France of allying with militant groups in the Lake Chad region to undermine Niger's security, allegedly with Nigeria's knowledge. Nigerian Minister of Information Mohammed Idris issued a statement on Thursday describing the allegation as unfounded and counterproductive. He said Nigeria respects the sovereignty of individual countries and is focused on tackling terrorism within its borders. And Austin Agbe, who is the Regional Advocacy Officer and ECOWAS Liaison Lead for West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, joins me for more on this. He joins me virtually. Good to have you join us.
Thank you very much, and nice to have you. Happy New Year, everyone.
So we understand that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuga, has now, for him, there was a statement that was released, and I just want to quote him. He hinted at Nigeria's readiness to enter into a candid discussions with Niger to address mutual concerns raised by President Tichiani. That's almost like Nigeria extending an olive branch to Niger. What do you make of that?
Well, for diplomatic relations, you expect that the bigger brother needs to always extend that kind of olive branch to maybe, I won't say a younger brother in this context, maybe to an ally to say, well, what you are thinking about is not correct. However, can we have a conversation on this so we can mutually agree on the path and then mutually defend our territorial boundaries? Don't forget that Niger and Nigeria are also in a military relation. Military relation exactly in a way that both countries have agreed to counter terrorism along the borders. So for Niger to have accused Nigeria directly, I think it was a mismatch, and I think it was not wise. But since Nigeria is now approaching it from a very diplomatic perspective, I think Niger should, as quickly as possible, take it, and so we can run together as a community of nations.
But for those who say that those allegations, like you have mentioned, are too weighty and too direct, and that perhaps Nigeria should have stood its ground and not make that overture to Niger, what do you make of that as well?
That is why I said a bigger brother. If I was in that kind of situation, and I'm to advise the government of Nigeria, I will not go that route. I will not. That allegation was just too weighty. However, when I was growing up, I have this philosophy that even when you think you are right, you should say sorry. You should be the first to say sorry, even when you know you are right. Not that you think, even when you know that you are right. Nigeria apparently taking that route, recognizing that there is no alliance with France to destabilize Niger. That does not mean that Nigeria does not have alliance with France. That does not mean that at all. Nigeria is a sovereign country with the mandate to engage in foreign policy. And France is our very strong ally as a country. We cannot, because of Niger, undermine our relationship with France. In like manner, it was Niger who sacked France, not Nigeria. We must understand the two countries are not the same. Niger is Niger, Nigeria is Nigeria. When opportunities they had with France, apparently Nigeria was in part of it, so to say. I think very strongly that it's a way of a bigger brother thing. Nigeria is a big brother in Africa. Nigeria is always playing that big brother role. Again, Nigeria has come out to play the big brother role. International relation-wise, I won't take that route. Because for you to have accused me publicly without sending me notes, without necessarily even having a conversation back end, without having a conversation with the military you have already signed a deal with. Nigeria and Niger had a smooth relation, whether military-wise or otherwise. Don't forget, the over 1,000 kilometer stretch of boundary between Nigeria and Niger, that community exists, mutual strong relation. It was because of that community that ECOWAS had to stand down, because Nigeria is president of ECOWAS, had to stand down on the proposed military intervention after the coup d'etat in Niger. It was folks in northern Nigeria who literally pursued or engaged in that high-level advocacy that Nigeria must not engage in any military invasion of Niger. And of course, today we know that ECOWAS had to step down, not necessarily President Tinubu stepping down, but ECOWAS. President Tinubu was just privileged to be the president at that material time. It is ECOWAS's decision, and ECOWAS had to step down on that military intervention. But I say again, it was a push from northern Nigeria because of relationship between Nigeria and Niger that we saw all of those. But for Niger to have gone public, in fact, on a Christmas day, to have made such a weighty allegation, I will not take it for granted. I will not take it for granted.
Ms. Aigbe, if I may come here, because some people will say that, look, and maybe it just in the routes that you have said you would not take, that whilst, you know, Nigeria is extending an olive branch, there has to be boundaries. Some people will say, look, forgiveness is not the absence of discipline. Where should Nigeria draw the line, even if there is a dialogue between both countries?
From the beginning, the line should be that Nigeria is a sovereign country. It has its right to enter into any international cooperation, the same way Niger has entered cooperation with Russia, Russia wasn't part of the divide or the engagement in the West African community. But today, 3 countries of West Africa, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, are not a tie with Russia. And Nigeria is not asking them that you are engaging in Russia and we don't want Russia to be close to our borders. And you can draw that inference from our engagement we now see today between Russia and Ukraine, a war that has continued to be ongoing. And you see what led to the war because of some NATO closeness to Russia and all of that. Nigeria can actually tell Niger to say, your engagement with Russia is not beneficial to us. We don't want Russia close to us. That's the same way Niger is telling Nigeria that we don't want France close to you. In fact, the accusation is direct, that we don't want you to have an alliance with France because we have driven France away. Nigeria, you are too close to us. Don't play with our enemy. That's the strong word there. Nigeria must go into this negotiation. I think those who had advised the government to go for that kind of intervention, which is very good. Again, in international relations, there is, or whether even conflict relations, we talked about the CCC, the consultation, the consolidation, and the confrontation. Apparently, the consultation is on. Nigeria is trying to concentrate on that consultation or mutual understanding. By the time there is no peace, there is no, we cannot see peace from the conversation. It will be very clear that Nigeria has done the best they could do in terms of even approaching Niger, because Niger accused you. You are also the one approaching them to say, no, let's sit down and have a conversation. What you are, this is clearly misinformation or disinformation. It is not true. Just a few days ago, or yesterday or thereabout, a French national was returned back to France because he had no visa to Nigeria. And so people will say, why would Nigeria do that? Based on the clear mutual relations that you are in with France, why will you do that? We are a nation of rules and laws, particularly at the international level. You cannot appear in Nigeria, especially with the ongoing speculation, with the ties or a possible militia group coming in from France, supporting militia groups in Nigeria to invade Niger. That kind of nationals who are coming without a visa to Nigeria can actually spotlight another room of conversation to say Nigeria has allowed a non-visa holder to enter the country.
I mean, there are immigration requirements for every country. It must be met. I'm sure if a Nigerian goes to France today without those requirements being met, that person will also be returned to Nigeria. But I want to stay on the diplomatic path. You know, we have now extended again. I keep calling it an olive branch. If it works and there, you know, dialogue is hard, do you see it being able to de-escalate the tension between both countries?
I think so very strongly. Those who have advised the government to take this route would have had the option A, B, and possibly option C. Conflict is part of human existence. I mean, what Niger is doing, you can't really blame Niger to have raised those concerns. I said much earlier that when President Buhari paid a state visit to that country, you could see the fair, you could see the enthusiasm, you could see the joy in President Macron's face. And going by President Tinubu's personal relationship with maybe President Macron or with, let me stay with France. President Buhari does have a strong tie with France. It was the first country he visited the moment after elections, even ahead of swearing in. He was in France for a while, and people say he went to relax. So that relaxation, snowballing to the future, that the same man who had gone to France to relax just after election, after he won the election, suddenly is also the same man at the aim of ECOWAS, was also the same man who declared sanctions, in quotes, even though, like I said initially, chair of ECOWAS doesn't mean you take decisions for ECOWAS. Decisions at the level of ECOWAS is consensus building. It is not majority of voters. No, it is consensus. So all countries must agree that this is the trajectory to follow. So if ECOWAS come up with sanctions, it means that all the countries in ECOWAS agreed for sanctions. If ECOWAS came up with military invasion, it means that all the countries in ECOWAS agreed. So what I'm saying, therefore, is that it is a personal relationship of the chair of ECOWAS, apparently with France, that led to those kind of speculation that eventually led to the accusation. So what I'm saying is, after the fanfare of the state visit, it was clear, maybe from intelligence report, that Niger may have gathered, they may have evidence at their disposal, but to have gone on air to make those allegations without a formal diplomatic procedure, including inviting the Nigerian ambassador to Niger to discuss those kind of situations. And that's exactly what Benin just did. When accusation came to Benin, Benin invited the Nigerian envoy in that country to say, what are you doing? This is not correct. We have also done that time and again when there are speculation in countries. Nigeria will invite the envoy of the other country for a conversation. And those are supposed to be diplomatic. And in diplomacy, you don't need to have gone public initially. You ought to explore all the diplomatic avenues before going to the public. But what Nigeria is doing,
doesn't that prove, Mr. Egbe, doesn't that say something about what the motive was? Because I've listened to ambassadors and those in the diplomatic space like yourself who have said, look, if it was factual, the first thing that they would have done is to exchange intelligence. But it almost seems like a propaganda, and so that's why they took to the press to push that information. Do you also sense that it was more of a propaganda than it was factual information?
In the world of propaganda, which is maybe correct in the context of government information, what I saw them doing was information manipulation. It was clearly disinformation, in my opinion, to try to spotlight that what you have in mind, Nigeria, we want to go ahead of you. So we hear feelers that relationship between Nigeria and France is getting stronger. Apparently, what was signed between Nigeria and France includes some mineral exploration. And France and Niger used to have that strong deal. Of course, in the context of Francophone, France literally take over everything that is in the Francophone colonies. So coming to Nigeria, feel like all the things that apparently that France used to take from Niger is no longer apparently it has moved to Nigeria, and maybe that's why France may not, Niger doesn't want to take it for granted that this could actually be a decoy to invade our country. And we have to go media.
Where is it? What can come straight?
Mr. Egbe, do we still have you on? All right, seems to be. All right, I understand he's back. Mr. Egbe, I'm still with your thought. Okay, the network is still breaking from your end, Mr. Egbe, and we also seem to be getting interference from you. That's Mr. Austin Egbe, who is the Regional Advocacy Officer and ECOWAS liaison lead for West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. He has very strong points he was making about the tension, or latest escalation between Niger and Nigeria, based on the allegations made by Niger, accusing Nigeria of trying to allegedly destabilize his country in collusion with France. And that's the conversation we've been having. We will take a break now and just try to reconnect with him so we can conclude that conversation. Stay with us.
There is always more to a story than the screaming headline. The part of a story that is not told casts a shadow. It's like the part of an object that is not reached by light. On TVC News, I'm able to explore the many angles there are to a story, talking to stakeholders, asking the difficult questions, and digging for facts. I believe the viewers are able to make a better decision if they're well informed and understand not just a part, but the complete story. TVC News, first with breaking news.
All right, thanks for staying with us. You're watching Standpoint, and we've been looking at the latest situation between Nigeria and Niger, where Niger accused Nigeria of trying to destabilize his country in collusion with France, and Nigeria has since rejected those allegations, saying, describing them as baseless. But Nigeria also extended an olive branch to Niger, for further dialogue to resolve this crisis. And we've been speaking with the Regional Advocacy Officer and ECOWAS liaison lead for West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, Austin Egbe. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you very much.
So, for President Tinubu, when this issue, of military takeover in Niger started, one of the things he said was that he was committed as the ECOWAS president, not as Nigerian president, because again, we have to be, or the chairman of ECOWAS, the heads of states and government, we have to be able to situate, in that particular office in the conversation. That he was committed to seeing democracy being restored in Niger. Is that still something that is achievable, looking at the state of things now?
Yeah, I think that when he made that commentary, when he became the chair of the heads of government, it was clear that Niger at that time had no coup. President Bozuma was the president of Niger, and you will expect that we're just battling with just two states under military regime, or three, Guinea inclusive, Guinea-Conakry inclusive, with Mali and Burkina Faso. So the test case for him was that coup. Imagine making a comment as the chair of heads of government in the community, and suddenly barely a month or less than a month, I think within that same month or thereabout, June of last year, the same month, there was a coup. And here you are faced with the first temptation. Apparently, my opinion though, it didn't apply all of the diplomatic routes. Ideally, there ought to have been consultation, consolidation before you will confront. But ECOWAS, under his chairmanship, eventually took the route of confrontation without looking at all of those consultations. In fact, and that is why the chair of Niger, the military president of Niger, had to seek his own olive branch from Mali Faso. Nigeria, ECOWAS took that decision of military intervention. There you are. The other two countries, Mali and Niger, quickly came to say, well, an injury to Niger is an injury to Mali, is an injury to Burkina Faso. And you know what that will mean in the ECOWAS community. That's not a route that if the president who has just emerged would like to take. So it was too late for the chair of ECOWAS, President Tinubu, to then start to backtrack in an attempt to start sending envoy to this country. That would have been the first he would have done. We had to send religious leaders, former military heads of states, of countries, particularly of Nigeria, to mediate with the Nigerian military head. That would have been the first, but that was a missed opportunity. I think that's what Nigeria is trying to now get done with this olive branch, to say, we understand your perception about Nigeria, that our president was ECOWAS chair, apparently when you took over as military head, and all of the things, sanctions that came, even though you also know that those sanctions have been dropped, and then the military intervention eventually, even though we also know that it was also dropped. But the initial perception of the military head is that France was using ECOWAS to invade them. France was manipulating ECOWAS against these Sahelian states, which may not be true. I am not saying it is true or false. I'm saying that it may not be true, because France does have diplomatic relations with other countries in the region. Recently, we just now know too that Côte d'Ivoire has also asked France to move its military base, not cutting the military, the relationship, not cutting the diplomatic tie, cutting the military base in Côte d'Ivoire. People can argue that people are Africans are gradually waking up. That Chad did the same thing recently, and now you have Côte d'Ivoire. Senegal is already having that permutation. So it is to come to a conclusion that Nigeria's president, who doubles as chair of ECOWAS, who superintended over the sanctions and over the proposed military intervention, has a strong tie with France. I mean, this is just a clear +1 - 1 divide 1, and that is why I call it.
I mean, Mr. Igbe, not to. Nigeria is, when it comes to trading partners in Africa, Nigeria is France's largest trading partner. Many would say that where your treasure is, your heart definitely would be. So, I mean, also the most populous country is not just in this matter. I mean, China and all other countries are grappling to do. We saw India's prime minister, in Nigeria recently. We've seen several. That of the president of Germany also came around. We've seen, in this administration, we've seen a lot of global leaders coming to Nigeria, and that's because they understand that, look, this is time to do business with Africa, and Nigeria is leading in Africa, and that's my thought. But I wanted to also just speak to this issue of these countries who have now decided to form their own alliance and have formed the alliance. They've been talking about their own passport and currency. And many say that ECOWAS has lost out of that negotiation, and perhaps now African Union should step in. Is there anything that the African Union can do at this moment? Who should be stepping in at this moment?
About a year ago, Wademos did an op-ed, a policy memo to the summit. That was the 65th summit of the heads of government that took place in Abuja 6 months ago exactly, about June of last year. And in that proposal, we had advised that ECOWAS should not directly involve in this negotiation, because ECOWAS was at the center of the dispute. That it was important that multilateral organizations and well-known individuals are put forward to advocate on behalf of the community because of integration that we all enjoy in ECOWAS, as it were. And our proposal was that the African Union should lead the conversation, backed by the United Nations, so that because you cannot solve a problem from the standpoint of the problem. If we use ECOWAS, it's going to be the recurring decimal of the accusation that the military heads of state, particularly in Burkina Faso, has always accused ECOWAS of. That ECOWAS does not say anything about constitutional coup, whereas ECOWAS goes ahead to begin to declare sanctions on military coup. Coup is coup, and that's the position that Wademos has also held. When heads of state manipulate their constitution to perpetuate themselves in power and elongate their term, it amounts to coup. It is civilian coup, or you may call it democratic coup, because you have elongated the mandate that was given to you, because you now saw that the mandate given to you is not longer enough. You want to elongate, and that's why we see most countries, particularly also in West Africa,
absolutely,
that you have one president living beyond 10 years or so. And there's also a very strong argument, which we also have argued at the level of Wademos. We had the same memo. We engaged the summit last December, the summit I had in Abuja. We were saying to ECOWAS that almost all the coup, in fact, had connection with governance. And ECOWAS does have a protocol on elections and governance, good governance. That ECOWAS need to review those protocols. That good governance was failing in the region, and that the election was no longer sustainable. Election was no longer election, so to say. People now use election to perpetuate themselves in power, and they make all manner of noise about their acceptance having won election. For instance, Rwanda, even though Rwanda is not a region, you justify your electoral victory based on your popularity, your so-called popularity. And you assume because you have won election, the people love you. And we know what happened in those countries. Togo, Burkina Faso, they are all good examples. And you also know what happened in Senegal recently, where the president attempted to elongate the election, and by so doing, elongate his term, and maybe gradually get to a third term or thereabout. What is happening is that ECOWAS has lost some grip, particularly the protocol has been weakened. And we're asking ECOWAS to strengthen those measures. Like you said, we need an African Union to now intervene. And ECOWAS need to invite the African Union to come in. Otherwise, ECOWAS is already there. The African Union cannot so pretend or overshadow what ECOWAS is doing. We are saying ECOWAS, step aside, engage African Union to mediate and have these three countries, these Sahelian countries, run as soon as possible.
I mean, just a lot to unpack when it comes to this particular conversation. I wish we could have more, but our time is up. Even when we look at the fact that, I mean, all of this goes back to the chains of colonialism, or what we call neo-colonialism, and what that has done to Africa in terms of, whether it's Francophone, Anglophone, or Lusophone countries, which we are now, instead of just being Africa that we are. But our time is up. Thank you so much for your time. Austin Igbe, Regional Advocacy Officer and ECOWAS Liaison Lead for West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. A pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break. When we return, we'll turn attention to Rivers State in the latest escalation of what has been a political crisis and tension in that state. Stay with us.